The first thing Lin Meow Meow registered was the headache. It wasn't your average, ran out of coffee headache. This was a full-blown, drum solo inside her skull, why did I drink the entire bottle of wine kind of headache. The second thing was the pillow. It was impossibly soft, swallowing her face in a cloud of silk that smelled like jasmine and money. Her IKEA memory foam pillow at home definitely did not smell like this. Her entire studio apartment could have fit inside this pillow. She forced one eye open. Then the other. The world resolved into a dizzying panorama of floor-to-ceiling windows, a skyline of glittering skyscrapers stretching out before her, and a chandelier that looked like a frozen waterfall of crystal. She was in a bed the size of her entire bathroom back home. Whose rich auntie's house did I pass out in? She mumbled, her voice hoarse. Alert, host consciousness confirmed. Initiating bonding protocol. A voice, sharp and synthetic, echoed not in the room, but directly inside her skull. Meow Meow yelped and clapped her hands over her ears, a futile gesture. Welcome, host Lin Meow Meow. You have been successfully transmigrated into the body of Ouyang Shui, Villainess supporting character of the web novel, CEO's Captive Heart. What? Villainess? Meow Meow whispered to the empty, obscenely luxurious room. Is this a dream? Did that expired cup noodle finally do me in? Negative. This is reality. Your previous vessel suffered catastrophic failure, note, tripped over a cat, fell into an open manhole. We have offered you a second chance. A series of images flooded her mind, a beautiful, sharp-faced woman with cold eyes, sneering at employees, throwing a glass of champagne in a rival's face, and looming over a terrifyingly handsome, icy-faced man. Ouyang Shui. The original owner of this body was a nightmare in designer clothing. Your mission, ensure the plot progresses as originally written by performing key villainous acts. Failure to comply will result in soul deletion. Soul deletion? Meow Meow squeaked, scrambling back on the bed. You can't just delete a soul. That's terrible customer service. I want a refund. Send me back to the manhole. Request denied. Initiating first task, the Grand Tech Summit humiliation. A mission brief, like a video game quest log, superimposed itself over her vision. Location, Shilin International Convention Center. Target, Jiang Chen, CEO of Jiang Corporation. Objective, interrupt his keynote speech. Publicly declare, your new AI project is as useless and pathetic as your family's failed business ventures. Consequence of failure, soul deletion. Meow Meow felt the blood drain from her face. I can't say that. That's so mean. And his family? That's a low blow. He'll destroy me. Before she could protest further, the bedroom door flew open. A stern woman in a severe black suit marched in, followed by two assistants holding garments. Miss Ouyang, you are due at the summit in 45 minutes. Your episode last night has already put us behind schedule. Meow Meow was manhandled out of bed, poured into a stunning, venomously red designer dress, and her face was painted into the sharp, contemptuous mask of Ouyang Shui. The reflection in the mirror was a stranger beautiful, dangerous, and utterly terrifying. The car ride was a blur of tinted windows and rising nausea. The system chirped cheerful reminders in her head. Remember, host. Project Confidence. Scorn. You are a magnificent serpent poised to strike. I'm more of a startled garden slug, Meow Meow muttered, her hands trembling in her lap. The convention center was a temple of chrome and glass, buzzing with the who's who of Shiling's tech elite. Cameras flashed. People parted for her like the Red Sea, their expressions a mix of fear and disdain. They saw Ouyang Shui. They didn't see the quivering mess of Lin Meow Meow inside. And then she saw him. Jiang Chen. On the massive stage, under the spotlight, he was more imposing than the images in her head. He stood a head taller than most, his broad shoulders filling out a tailored black suit perfectly. His features were sharp enough to cut glass, his jawline firm, and his eyes even from a distance were the color of a winter storm, sweeping over the audience with an unnerving, analytical calm. His voice was a low, resonant baritone, explaining complex data streams, and the entire hall hung on his every word. He was cold, intimidating, and magnificent. Target acquired. Approach the stage. The podium is unguarded. Now, host. Now. I can't, Meow Meow whispered, her feet rooted to the spot. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Soul deletion imminent in 10. 9. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic. It was a choice between certain death now and probable death later. Her body moved on autopilot, fueled by sheer terror. She didn't walk, she stumbled forward, her ridiculously high heels catching on a loose wire. She pitched sideways, barely catching herself on the edge of the stage steps. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jiang Chen's speech faltered for a fraction of a second, his stormy eyes narrowing on the disruption. This was it. This was where Ouyang Shui was supposed to deliver her cutting remark, shattering his pride and cementing her role as the story's villain. Miao Miao hauled herself onto the stage, the lights blinding her. She stood there, disheveled and panting, under the gaze of thousands and the freezing glare of Jiang Chen. The system screamed in her head. The line. Say the line. She grabbed the microphone. Her mouth was desert dry. She opened it. Closed it. Opened it again. The words, "Your new AI project is as useless and pathetic as your family's failed business ventures," were right there, on the tip of her tongue. But what came out was a high-pitched, wobbly squeak. Your presentation slides. She stammered, her voice echoing through the silent hall. Jiang Chen's eyebrow twitched, the only sign of his surprise. She took a ragged breath, her brain short-circuiting. They're so well formatted. The color scheme between the charts and the headers is very harmonious. Dead silence. You could have heard a pin drop in another dimension. Her body, still operating on a primal instinct to appease the terrifyingly large predator in front of her, decided to take it a step further. She let go of the microphone with one trembling hand and gave Jiang Chen two shaky thumbs up, she squeaked, for emphasis. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. The audience was frozen in collective, bewildered shock. The system in her head emitted a sound like a dial-up modem having a stroke. Critical error. Unrecognized behavior detected. Narrative coherence compromised. And Jiang Chen. Jiang Chen didn't look angry. He didn't look humiliated. He slowly looked from her mortified face, down to her still upraised thumbs, and then back to her face. The corner of his mouth did something then. It wasn't a smile. It was the faintest, most microscopic twitch. A flicker of something unidentifiable in those stormy eyes, not fury, but a deep, profound, and utterly captivating curiosity. The security finally snapped out of their stupor and started moving toward the stage. But the damage, or rather, the bizarre, unprecedented event was done. The silence in the limousine was thicker than the bulletproof glass and twice as heavy. Lin Miao Miao sat ramrod straight, her hands clenched into fists so tight her knuckles were white. The ghost of her own thumbs up seemed to be permanently imprinted on the inside of her eyelids. Ouyang Shui's head of security, a mountain of a man named Lao Zhang who had the presence of a dormant volcano, hadn't said a word since ushering her off the stage and into the car. He just stared ahead, his expression suggesting he was mentally calculating the severance package he'd demand for putting up with, whatever that had been. Inside her head, however, it was anything but quiet. Diagnostic running. Host neural pathways appear to be fried. Assessing damage to villainous protocols. The system's voice was laced with static, like a corrupted text-to-speech program. The Grand Tech Summit humiliation has been logged as Category 5 catastrophe, unprecedented verbal and gestural deviation. I'm sorry. Miao Miao whispered frantically, her words swallowed by the plush interior. I panicked. He's so tall. And his voice sounds like it could file taxes for you. My brain just blue-screened. Apology rejected. Failure is not an option. It is a one-way ticket to non-existence. However, the system paused, the static clearing slightly. Anomaly detected. Target Jiang Chen's reaction was not within projected parameters. Anger, 0%. Contempt, 15%. Confusion, 85%. This presents an opportunity. An opportunity? Miao Miao asked, a tiny, foolish flicker of hope igniting in her chest. An opportunity for me to go home and forget this ever happened? Negative. An opportunity for a more direct, sustained sabotage campaign. Initiating directive, Operation Viper's Nest. A new quest log materialized in her vision, the text glowing with ominous intent. Objective, infiltrate Jiang Corp as a personal intern to CEO Jiang Chen. Primary goal, steal the core algorithm blueprints for Project Chimera. Secondary goal, undermine morale, create internal dissent, and generally be a nuisance. Method, utilize your family's influence to secure the position immediately. Consequence of failure, let's not repeat ourselves, shall we? Soul deletion. Meow Meow felt her breakfast a terrifyingly elegant poached egg that had probably been massaged by a monk threatened to make a reappearance. An intern? To him? I can't even use the office printer without summoning IT in tears. I'm going to be the worst corporate spy in the history of corporate espionage. Your self-awareness is noted, but irrelevant. Comply or be deleted. Back at the penthouse, the stern woman Madame Li, Ouyang Shue's personal assistant and watchdog, was waiting. Her lips were pressed into a thin, disapproving line. The board is concerned, Miss Ouyang. Your public display has sparked unflattering speculation. Some are calling it a nervous breakdown. Others, a bizarre attempt at flirtation. Meow Meow winced. Flirtation? Was giving a CEO a thumbs up the new equivalent of sliding him your phone number? However, Madame Li continued, her eyes sharp, your father has arranged a solution. A cooperative project with Jiang Corporation. You are to be personally embedded there as an intern, reporting directly to CEO Jiang. It is a gesture of goodwill, to smooth over this incident. Meow Meow's blood ran cold. The system was terrifyingly efficient. It hadn't just given her a task, it had already moved the chess pieces in the real world to make it happen. She was a puppet, and someone or something was pulling the strings with brutal precision. The next morning, she found herself standing in the soaring, minimalist lobby of Jiang Corporation Tower. It was a cathedral of cold, polished steel and glass, where everyone walked with purpose and spoke in hushed, important tones. She was wearing another one of Ouyang Shue's power suits, a severe black number that probably cost more than her old annual salary, but she felt like a kid playing dress-up. She was escorted to the top floor, the sanctum sanctorum. The air itself felt more pressurized up here. Jiang Chen's personal assistant, a young man with a perfectly calibrated smile named Alex, didn't even blink at her arrival. CEO Jiang is in a meeting. Your workstation is here. Alex gestured to a small, sleek desk situated directly outside Jiang Chen's office door. It wasn't inside his office, but it was positioned so that anyone entering or leaving would have to pass her. It was a seat of both privilege and intense scrutiny. First task, bring him coffee. Laced with salt. A classic, yet effective, power play. The system commanded. I can't poison him. Meow Meow hissed under her breath, pretending to adjust her monitor. IT is a prank, not a poisoning. The distinction is vital for plausible deniability. Proceed. Her hand shook as she navigated the terrifyingly complex espresso machine in the executive kitchen. She managed to brew a cup, and with the guilt of a murderer, poured a generous helping of sea salt into the dark liquid. Stirring it felt like a crime against humanity. Taking a deep breath, she carried the mug into his office. He was at his desk, his back to her, speaking in low, commanding tones on a video call. The view from his window was the entire city of Xiling, laid out at his feet. Your coffee, CEO Jiang, she mumbled, placing the mug on a coaster with a clatter that was far too loud. He didn't turn, merely holding up a finger to finish his sentence. The data stream needs to be recalibrated by end of day. I don't care about the bottlenecks. Fix it. He ended the call, swiveled his chair, and picked up the coffee. Meow Meow's heart stopped. He brought it to his lips. He took a sip. His entire body went still. For a heart-stopping second, he didn't react at all. Then, very slowly, he placed the mug back down. His stormy eyes lifted and pinned her to the spot. Miss Ouyang, he said, his voice dangerously calm. Is there a problem with the sugar? Meow Meow's brain, once again, chose flight over fight. The sugar looked tired, she blurted out. I thought the salt might wake it up. For you. To help with your leadership stamina? She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Jiang Chen stared at her. It was the same unreadable look from the summit. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. My leadership stamina, he repeated, deadpan. Is that a concern of yours? No. Yes. I mean, a well-seasoned leader is a good leader? She was digging her own grave with a spoon. He watched her squirm for another agonizing moment before pressing a button on his desk. Alex, bring me a new coffee. And please assist Miss Ouyang in finding the sugar dispensers. They are, apparently, in need of a nap. Alex appeared, his polite smile never wavering, and gently guided her out. Mission failed. Host's apparent incompetence is statistically improbable. Analyzing, the system sounded almost thoughtful. The rest of the day was a parade of minor disasters. She was tasked with organizing a stack of confidential R&D files. The system told her to misplace the most critical ones. Instead, she color-coded them by the shade of the folder tab's rainbow order and created a detailed, illustrated index because it's more intuitive this way. She was asked to run a diagnostic on a server interface. The system commanded her to install a data mining bug. Instead, she accidentally downloaded a Trojan horse disguised as a cute desktop pet app, which immediately started making pixelated kissy faces at everyone on the internal network and triggered a level 2 security alert from the IT department. By 5 p.m., the Jiang Corp IT team looked ready to unionize just to have her fired. As she packed her bag, utterly defeated, Jiang Chen's door opened. He stood there, silhouetted against the setting sun. He didn't look angry. He looked intrigued. Miss Ouyang, he said, his voice cutting through the hum of the dying workday. That was, without a doubt, the most disruptive and bewildering first day any intern has ever had at this company. Meow Meow braced for the dismissal. You will report here again tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp, he continued, a faint, almost imperceptible glint in his icy eyes. I find myself curious to see what kind of catastrophe you'll manage next. The 7:55 a.m. silence of the Jiang Corp executive floor was a living entity, breathing in the scent of polished granite and expensive coffee. Lin Meow Meow sat at her desk, a tiny, suited island in a sea of quiet opulence. She'd spent half the night practicing her villainous intern persona in the mirror, which had mostly resulted in a series of constipated-looking scowls. Morning briefing, host. Today's primary objective, acquire the Project Chimera core algorithm blueprints. They are located on CEO Zhang's secure server, Drive Zeta. The words, core algorithm blueprints, flashed in her mind, accompanied by a graphic of a glowing, animated file. It looked like something from a sci-fi movie. Meow Meow felt a fresh wave of nausea. Acquire? You mean steal. You want me to commit actual, jail-time-worthy corporate espionage. Semantics. This is a critical plot point. The original Ouyang Shui succeeded, leading to a significant setback for Jiang Corp and deepening the male lead's hatred. You will do the same. But I don't want to deepen his hatred, she whined internally, slumping over her keyboard. I'd rather he just thought I was a weirdo. Weirdos are harmless. Spies get lawsuits. And deleted. Your preferences are not a variable in this equation. Method, you will be given temporary administrator credentials to organize the R&D digital archives. Use this access to locate and download the files. At precisely 8:02 a.m., Alex appeared, his smile still unnervingly placid. Miss Ouyang, CEO Jiang has requested you organize the digital archives for the Q2 R&D projects. I've granted you temporary level 3 access. He handed her a slip of paper with a username and a password. The files are somewhat disordered. Your task is to create a logical, searchable structure. Meow Meow took the slip as if it were a live grenade. This was it. The system's plan was in motion. Her hands were cold and clammy. She logged in. The server directory was a nightmare, a digital hoarder's paradise. Files were named with incomprehensible acronyms like, it was chaos. Scanning. Project Chimera files detected. Folder path, Zeta/Chimera/core. Initiate download. A progress bar, visible only to her, appeared in the corner of her vision. 1%. 2%. It was agonizingly slow. Each percentage point felt like a countdown to her own perp walk. Her mind raced. What would happen to the engineers who worked on this? To Jiang Chen? The original Ouyang Shui hadn't cared, but Meow Meow, whose biggest professional sin was once accidentally replying all to a company-wide email about the new toilet paper policy, was having a full-blown ethical crisis. An idea, desperate and foolish, sparked in her mind. A loophole. System, she whispered, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The objective is to acquire the blueprints, right? It doesn't specify what I have to do with them after? The implied purpose is to transfer them to the rival Ouyang Corporation. Do not attempt to circumvent the directive. Right, of course, Meow Meow muttered, not listening. But first, I just need to understand the filing system. For my Villainess report. As the download bar crept to 10%, she began to work. But she wasn't just downloading the files. She was creating new folders. She wasn't deleting anything. Instead, she was creating backups. Dozens of them. She created a folder called Archive Do Not Delete, very important. And inside that, another called Seriously, Backup of Critical Stuff. She copied the Chimera files there. Then, she created another backup hidden inside a folder named Invoices 2018. Then another zipped and password protected, with the password hint being Jiangchen is scary but organized. She even created a text file named read_me_txt with a step-by-step guide on how to locate all the backups, complete with helpful arrows made of asterisks. She was, essentially, being the world's most conscientious digital hoarder. She was sabotaging the sabotage by creating a fortress of redundancy. Host behavior is erratic. Download is complete. Initiate data transfer protocol. Wait. What if the file gets corrupted during transfer? Meow Meow said, a little too loudly, drawing a curious glance from Alex. She lowered her voice. A good spy verifies her assets. I'm just running a diagnostic. She right-clicked on the main Chimera folder and selected Properties. She wasn't entirely sure what she was looking at, but the sea of technical details gave her an idea. She opened a new email, addressed to her own Ouyang Corp email address, attached the files, and typed in the subject line, Urgent, Analysis of Jiang Corp Weaknesses. Her finger hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. She couldn't do it. Instead, she highlighted the entire email and pressed delete. Then, she went into the deleted items folder and permanently erased it. Her heart was hammering. She had directly disobeyed a command. Warning, host insubordination detected. Data transfer protocol aborted. Prepare for corrective, the system's threat was cut off as a shadow fell over her desk. Meow Meow jumped, slamming her laptop shut with a loud thwack. Jiangchen was standing there, having emerged from his office as silently as a panther. He was holding a tablet, his expression unreadable. Miss Ouyang, he said, his voice a low rumble. A security alert just flagged anomalous data activity from this terminal. Multiple large file transfers and an unprecedented number of redundant copy operations. He glanced at her screen, then back at her terrified face. Care to explain what you were doing? This was it. She was caught. Fired. Sued. Deleted. Her mouth went dry. I was organizing. The lie was weak, pathetic. Organizing, he repeated, his tone flat. He leaned over slightly, his presence overwhelming. He reached out, and for a heart-stopping moment, she thought he was going to take her laptop. Instead, he tapped a key, waking the screen. The server directory was still open, showcasing her labyrinth of backup folders and the read_me_if_everything_is_on_fire file. He scrolled. Slowly. His eyes scanned the nonsensical but meticulously created structure. He saw the Chimera files, safe and sound, replicated in half a dozen different, bizarre locations. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then, he did the last thing she expected. He straightened up, a faint, almost imperceptible crease appearing between his eyebrows. It wasn't anger. It was pure, unadulterated bewilderment. Ouyang Shui, he said, his voice laced with a curiosity that was far more terrifying than any anger could have been. Are you trying to improve our cybersecurity through aggressive, and frankly baffling, redundancy? Meow Meow's brain, now conditioned to short-circuit in his presence, latched onto the lifeline he'd unknowingly thrown her. Yes, she squeaked. The files looked vulnerable. I was just building them a digital bunker. With many, many safe rooms. Jiangchen stared at her for a long moment. He then looked at the read_me file again, his lips quirking in that same microscopic, world-altering twitch. Noted, he said, his voice dry as dust. Next time, perhaps inform IT before you single-handedly attempt to fortify our entire R&D division. They tend to get anxious. He turned and walked back into his office, leaving her slumped in her chair, a nervous wreck drenched in cold sweat. Analysis complete. Mission, Steel Blueprints status, failed. However, target's hostility level has decreased by 5%. His confusion level has increased by 30%. Recalibrating strategy. The system sounded utterly lost. Meow Meow, for the first time, felt a tiny, rebellious spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was more than one way to survive this. The following week passed in a blur of low-grade terror and high-grade confusion. Meow Meow's existence at Geoncorp had settled into a bizarre rhythm. She was like a ghost in the machine, a very clumsy, well-dressed ghost who caused minor system alerts and left a trail of perplexed colleagues in her wake. Jiang Chen had assigned her to stress-test the company's new internal communication app, JiangConnect. The system, seeing an opportunity, had commanded her to plant a bug that would send random, embarrassing emojis to the entire company mailing list. Simple. Elegant. Psychological warfare. Initiate the Clown Fiesta protocol. Meow Meow, however, had instead stress-tested it by accidentally live-streaming her 15-minute struggle to open a bag of almonds to the all-hands meeting channel. The comments, initially frantic, had slowly turned into a bizarrely supportive tutorial thread, with engineers from 3 different departments offering advice on leveraging techniques and the structural integrity of almond packaging. Jiang Chen had simply had the feature disabled, noting with that infuriatingly calm tone, user error has revealed a critical need for stream confirmation prompts. Noted. He was studying her. She could feel it. Every blunder was met not with fury, but with that same piercing, analytical curiosity, as if she were a strange new algorithm he was trying to decode. It was unnerving. Host's incompetence field is too strong. It is repelling conventional conflict. Deploying Countermeasure, by Qingyue. The name sent a shiver down Meow Meow's spine. By Qingyue. The female lead of the original novel. Sweet, kind, brilliant, and the perfect foil to Ouyang Shue's venom. In the story, she was an up-and-coming project manager in the Sustainable Tech Division, the very picture of graceful capability. Meow Meow had been secretly hoping to avoid her. She liked the idea of Bai Qingyue from the novel a genuinely good person. The thought of being pitted against her made Meow Meow's stomach churn. She didn't have to wait long. It happened on a Tuesday. Meow Meow was tasked with delivering a physical copy of a revised contract to Jiang Chen's office. As she approached his door, it opened, and Bai Qingyue stepped out. She was even more stunning in person. She had a gentle, earnest face, intelligent eyes, and wore a simple but elegant dress that screamed quiet competence. She was holding a tablet, a slight, frustrated frown on her face. "Miss Ouyang," Bai Qingyue said, her voice soft but firm. "A moment, please?" Meow Meow froze, the contract clutched to her chest like a shield. "Why yes?" "I've been reviewing the server logs from last week," Bai Qingyue began, her tone polite but laced with steel. "The day you were organizing the R&D files. There was a significant data spike, and a security flag was triggered by an attempted external email transfer from your terminal." Meow Meow's blood ran cold. She hadn't sent it. She'd deleted it. Bai Qingyue took a step closer, her voice dropping. "I know we're supposed to be on the same team, given this new cooperative project. But I care about this company. I care about the people whose work you seem so intent on disrupting." She gestured vaguely at Meow Meow, encompassing everything from the salted coffee to the almond livestream. "What were you trying to email out, Miss Ouyang? And to whom?" This was it. This was the classic framing scene. The original Ouyang Shui would have sneered, called her a lowly employee, and stormed off, cementing her own guilt. The system was screaming at her to do just that. Confirm her suspicions. Act with arrogant contempt. This is a key confrontation. Increase her distrust. But Meow Meow looked into Bai Qingyue's eyes that were filled with a genuine desire to protect the company she loved, and she cracked. The pressure of the last few weeks, the constant fear of soul deletion, the loneliness of living a lie, it all came crashing down. Her bottom lip began to tremble. A hot tear escaped and traced a path through her perfectly applied foundation. Then another. Bai Qingyue's stern expression faltered, replaced by shock. I wasn't trying to send anything," Meow Meow choked out, her voice thick with tears. "I was just. The files looked so lonely and messy. And I get scared when things are messy. And your boss is so tall and his voice does that rumbly thing, and I just wanted everything to be safe and in its place." She was sobbing in earnest now, fat, messy tears that were utterly at odds with Ouyang Shue's icy persona. She hugged the contract tighter, crumpling the expensive paper. Why are you so mean? I'm just here to water the plants and admire CEO Zhang's leadership from afar. I'm not a corporate spy, I'm a floral arranger with anxiety. Bai Qingyue was utterly flummoxed. She had been prepared for cold denial, for haughty insults. She was armed for a duel with a viper. She was not prepared for a sobbing, emotionally incontinent garden slug. Miss Ouyang, I didn't mean to. She stammered, taking an involuntary step back. Just then, Jiang Chen's office door swung open. He stood there, having undoubtedly heard the entire, tearful breakdown. His gaze swept from Bai Qingyue's confused face to Miao Miao's utterly devastated one. The air crackled with tension. Bai Qingyue recovered first, her professionalism kicking in. CEO Jiang, I was just questioning Miss Ouyang about the security flag from last week. There appears to have been I am aware of the flag, Miss Bai, Jiang Chen interrupted, his voice cool and final. His eyes, however, were fixed on Miao Miao, who was trying and failing to mop up her tears with the sleeve of her designer blazer. He took a step forward, positioning himself slightly between the two women. It was a subtle, but unmistakable, shift. The matter has been addressed, he stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. The activity was anomalous, but no data was exfiltrated. The security system functioned as designed. That is the end of it. Bai Qingyue's eyes widened slightly. He was shutting her down. Protecting the source of the chaos. But, sir, the pattern of behavior is my concern, not yours, he said, his gaze still on Miao Miao. Return to your project, Miss Bai. The solar grid analytics are waiting. It was a clear dismissal. Bai Qingyue pressed her lips together, a flash of hurt and confusion in her eyes. She gave a tight nod. Of course, CEO Jiang. She shot one last, bewildered look at the weeping Miao Miao before turning and walking away, her steps sharp with frustration. The hallway was silent again, save for Miao Miao's sniffles. Jiang Chen looked down at her. The storm in his eyes had quieted into something more complex, more calculating. Stop crying, he said, his voice not unkind, but firm. He pulled a crisp, monogrammed handkerchief from his pocket, a ridiculously anachronistic and elegant gesture, and handed it to her. Miao Miao took it with trembling fingers, hiccuping. You are the most disruptive, confusing, and illogical variable to ever enter this company, Ouyang Shue, he said quietly. But one thing is becoming clear. She looked up at him, her vision blurry with tears. You are a terrible spy. He turned and walked back into his office, leaving her standing in the hallway, clutching his handkerchief and the crumpled contract, the scent of his faint, clean cologne the only proof the entire surreal encounter had even happened. Confrontation with female lead, resolved. Outcome, unprecedented. Bai Qingyue's suspicion, neutralized via emotional overwhelm. Target Jiang Chen's behavior, deviating significantly. Host. What are you? The system didn't sound angry anymore. It sounded, for the first time, genuinely fascinated. And a little afraid. The Great Handkerchief Incident, as Miao Miao had privately dubbed it, left a strange calm in its wake. For 2 days, no one bothered her. Alex gave her a wide berth. Bai Qingyue, when their paths crossed in the elevator, offered a tight, confused nod rather than a confrontation. It was as if she'd emitted a psychic shockwave that rendered her temporarily untouchable. Jiang Chen, meanwhile, had become a ghost. He was in back-to-back closed-door meetings, his presence reduced to a low murmur behind his soundproofed office door and the occasional glimpse of him striding through the bullpen with a phalanx of anxious-looking executives. The system had been uncharacteristically quiet, too. No new missions, no screeching directives. Just a low, thoughtful hum in the back of her mind, like a computer running a deep-level diagnostic. It was unsettling. Analysis of host's emotional output as a tactical weapon is inconclusive. Further data required. It muttered occasionally, sounding almost frustrated. This peace was shattered on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Alex had gone to lunch, and the phone on his desk rang. On instinct, Miao Miao picked it up. CEO Zhang's office, she said, trying to sound professional. The voice on the other end was smooth, male, and utterly unfamiliar. Ah, yes. I'm calling from Synergy Labs, we have a delivery for Project Chimera. The paperwork needs a signature from Mr. Jiang's office. Is he available? A cold dread trickled down Miao Miao's spine. Synergy Labs. The name meant nothing to her, but it made the system in her head shriek to life. Alert! Synergy Labs is a cutout for the rival Lee Corporation. This is the spy from the original plot. His name is Mr. Wang. He wears a silver tie pin and frequents the tuna sandwiches at the cafe on the ground floor. The original plot. The real corporate spy. The one Ouyang Shui was supposed to secretly aid, not bumble past like a lost puppy. Directive: facilitate the data drop. Provide him with the access he needs. This is your chance to redeem yourself and fulfill your villainous arc. The man, Mr. Wang, was still talking. Just need a quick signature to release the materials. Perhaps I could come up? Miao Miao's mind raced. This was it. The crossroads. She could play the villain. She could give him what he wanted, secure her place in the plot, and maybe, just maybe, avoid deletion. She looked at Jiang Chen's closed door. She thought of the engineers she'd seen, laughing over coffee, of Bai Qingyue's fierce loyalty, of Jiang Chen's confusing but non-murderous tolerance. She couldn't. But she also couldn't just hang up. The system would punish her. Mr. Wang would get suspicious. A desperate, insane idea formed a hybrid of defiance and compliance that was becoming her signature. CEO Jiang is in a meeting that cannot be interrupted, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. But I can take a message. She grabbed a pen and a sticky note. You said your name was Wang? And you're from Synergy Labs? And this is regarding Project Chimera? Confirm his identity. Excellent, host. The system cheered, misreading her hesitation for cunning. Indeed, the voice purred. Right, Miao Miao said, scribbling on the sticky note. She wasn't writing a message for Jiang Chen. She was writing a message about Mr. Wang. Man called Wang, she wrote, her handwriting a frantic scrawl. Synergy Labs. Asking about Chimera. Likes tuna sandwiches. Silver tie pin. Very suspicious. She underlined suspicious 3 times and drew a little frowny face next to it for good measure. Thank you for calling, Mr. Wang, she said brightly into the phone. I'll make sure CEO Jiang gets your message the moment he's free. She hung up before he could respond, her heart thumping. She stared at the sticky note. It was ridiculous. It was childish. It was the only thing she could think of. Host. What was the nature of that message? The system asked, its tone laced with sudden suspicion. Due diligence. Miao Miao chirped, her voice an octave too high. A good spy. I mean, assistant. Documents everything. For the Villainess report. She peeled the sticky note off the pad. Now, what to do with it? She couldn't just leave it on Alex's desk. It was too incriminating. She couldn't slide it under Jiang Chen's door, he might not see it for hours. Her eyes landed on his personal espresso machine. He used it every afternoon at 3 p.m. sharp. It was the one thing on his desk he interacted with personally. Taking a deep breath, she stood up, walked into his empty office, and marched to his desk. With the reverence of a priestess placing an offering on an altar, she stuck the bright yellow note directly onto the side of the gleaming silver machine, right at eye level. It looked absurd. A frantic, cartoonish warning plastered on a monument to corporate power. She fled back to her desk, her face flushed. An hour later, Jiang Chen emerged from his meeting. He looked tired, his tie slightly loosened. As predicted, he went straight for the espresso machine. Miao Miao watched, barely breathing, from her desk. He saw the note. He stopped. He picked up the portafilter, then put it down. He reached out and peeled the sticky note off the machine. He held it in his hand, reading it. Miao Miao saw his shoulders go still. He didn't turn around. He didn't call security. He simply stood there, reading her stupid, scribbled note with the frowny face. After a long moment, he crumpled the note in his fist. Then, he did something extraordinary. He pulled out his phone, typed a quick message, and put it away. He then proceeded to make his coffee, his movements as precise and unhurried as ever. But as he turned to go back into his inner office, carrying his mug, his eyes met hers across the bullpen. There was no smile, no twitch. But there was a new intensity in his gaze, a sharp, focused light that hadn't been there before. It wasn't curiosity. It was acknowledgement. He gave her a single, almost imperceptible nod. Then he was gone. 10 minutes later, Meow Meow saw from the window a man in a trench coat, a man with a distinct silver tie pin being escorted firmly out of the building's main lobby by two very large, very serious-looking security guards. Mission: facilitate data drop. Status: catastrophically failed. Rival asset compromised. Host's actions have directly aided the male lead. The system was silent for a full minute. When it spoke again, its voice was different. The synthetic edge was gone, replaced by a low, buzzing hum of pure, unadulterated static. Paradox detected. Narrative integrity at 23%. Host: you are not Ouyang Shui. You are an anomaly. A glitch. The hum grew louder, painful. Corrective protocols are unavailable. Reassessing. Reassessing. And then, with a final, dissonant crackle, the voice in her head went completely, utterly silent. For the first time since she'd fallen into the manhole, Lin Meow Meow was alone with her own thoughts. The silence was deafening. And terrifying. What had she done? The silence was a physical presence. It was a vacuum, a void where for weeks there had been a constant, nagging, often terrifying narration of her life. Lin Meow Meow sat at her desk, frozen, waiting for the other shoe to drop. For the static to return. For the voice to announce her deletion. Nothing. She tentatively thought a question into the emptiness of her mind. System? Only the hum of the office HVAC answered. The frantic, panicked rhythm of her heart began to slow, replaced by a slow dawning, terrifying realization. She was free. The puppet strings had been cut. The gun to her head had, seemingly, vanished. A hysterical bubble of laughter fought its way up her throat, and she choked it back into a sob. She was free. But she was also stranded. A woman from another world, trapped in the body of a villainess, in the office of a man she was supposed to have destroyed, with no guide, no mission, and no idea what happened to glitches in the system. The rest of the day passed in a surreal haze. She performed her tasks, answering emails, sorting files with the numb automatism of a robot. Every time Jiang Chen's door opened, she flinched, expecting him to point at her and declare, "There's the glitch. Security." But he didn't. He moved through his day with his usual ruthless efficiency, though his eyes lingered on her a fraction longer than necessary, his gaze more thoughtful than accusatory. The next morning, the silence was still there. So was the fear. What if the system was just rebooting? What if it came back angrier? What if soul deletion was just on a delay? She was so wrapped in her paranoia that she barely registered Alex assigning her a new task. "Miss Ouyang, we need you to perform final user testing on the Zen Garden module of our new employee wellness app," he said, placing a tablet in her hands. "Just interact with it. See if it's calming." It was a blatant attempt to keep her out of trouble. A digital babysitter. Numbly, Meow Meow took the tablet. The app opened to a beautifully rendered Japanese garden. A koi pond, cherry blossom trees, smooth stones. A prompt appeared: find your center. Arrange the stones. A flicker. A ghost of a signal. A single, distorted square bracket appeared in her mind's eye before fading back into nothingness. Meow Meow's breath hitched. It was still in there. Damaged, but not gone. Tears of frustration welled in her eyes. She wasn't free. She was in limbo. She stared at the stupid, serene garden on the screen. Arrange the stones? Her life was a pile of rubble. Her center had been sold for parts. With a sudden, furious energy born of pure, helpless despair, she started dragging the digital stones. But she wasn't arranging them into a peaceful pattern. She was slamming them together. She was building a wobbly, precarious tower. She was spelling out the word help in clumsy, pixelated rocks. Then, she found the koi pond. The prompt said, feed the koi. Find peace. She started stabbing the screen, violently tossing virtual fish food at the poor digital koi until they were swarming in a frantic, pixelated frenzy. It wasn't peaceful. It was a Piscine riot. A new, hidden button appeared, obscured by a lily pad. Out of sheer spite, she pressed it. A tiny, mustachioed samurai avatar popped up. I am sensei. Let us meditate. A chirpy, text-to-speech voice announced from the tablet. Meditate this, Meow Meow muttered, and dragged the sensei into the koi pond. He sank with a blooping sound, then respawned on the bridge, looking pixelated and offended. She was so absorbed in her digital tantrum that she didn't hear the approach. A shadow fell over her. What in the name of all that is efficient are you doing? Jiang Chen was standing over her, looking from her tear-streaked, furious face to the tablet, where she was now trying to pile all the cherry blossoms on top of the drowned sensei. It's not calming, she wailed, the words tearing out of her. It's condescending. My life is falling apart and it wants me to arrange rocks. The koi are judging me. The sensei is a fraud. She threw the tablet onto her desk. It skidded and landed face up, the tiny samurai now frantically running back and forth on the bridge, shouting, anxiety detected. Breathe with me. Jiang Chen stared at the tablet. Then he looked at her. The storm in his eyes had quieted into something still and deep. He didn't see a villainess. He didn't see a pawn. He saw a raw, exposed nerve. You're right, he said, his voice low. It is condescending. He reached down, picked up the tablet, and with one deft tap, force quit the application. The serene, mocking garden vanished, leaving a black screen. The human psyche is not a puzzle to be solved with pretty graphics, he stated, placing the tablet back on her desk. It's a complex system of inputs, outputs, and... His eyes scanned her face. Unforeseen variables. He was talking about the app. But he was looking at her. Come with me, he said, turning abruptly. Panic seized her. Where? Am I fired? Is this where you have me quietly disposed of? He didn't answer, simply leading her out of the executive suite, down the elevator, and into the sprawling, warehouse-like space of the R&D lab. It was a cacophony of 3D printers whirring, engineers shouting over terminals, and the smell of solder and coffee. He stopped at a cluttered workstation where a young woman with neon green hair was wrestling with a tangled mess of wires and sensors. Lena, Jiang Chen said. The prototype. The one that reads biometric feedback. Lena looked up, startled to see the CEO. The BFR one? It's a mess, sir. The galvanic skin response sensor is give it to her, he interrupted, nodding at Meow Meow. Lena blinked, then shrugged and handed Meow Meow a bulky wristband with a blinking light. Put it on, Jiang Chen commanded. Trembling, Meow Meow clipped it on her wrist. The light glowed red. Now, he said, crossing his arms and leaning against a workbench. Tell me what's really wrong. It was a direct order. An invitation to a cliff's edge. The silence in her head was screaming. The wristband's light flickered to a frantic, pulsating crimson. The dam broke. It's not me, she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a chaotic flood. I'm not her. I'm not Ouyang Shui. I'm Lin Meow Meow. I'm from somewhere else. And there was this voice in my head and it told me to be mean to you and to steal things, and if I didn't it said it would delete me, and now it's gone, but I think it's just broken and I'm so scared. She was babbling, half in English, half in Mandarin, a torrent of incoherent confession. She talked about the manhole, the system, the missions, her fear of him, her guilt over Bai Qingyue, the tuna sandwich spy. It was all nonsense. It was all true. The engineers had stopped working. The entire lab was silent, watching the infamous Ouyang Shui have a complete and very public breakdown about voices in her head and soul deletion. Jiang Chen didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, his expression unreadable, his eyes fixed on her, on the wildly blinking red light on the wristband. When her words finally dissolved into hiccuping, exhausted sobs, he pushed himself off the workbench. He walked over to her, reached out, and with surprising gentleness, unclipped the wristband. The light was still a solid, furious red. He held it up, showing the reading to Lena. See, he said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence of the lab. Not calming. Then he did something that made every jaw in R&D drop. He turned back to Meow Meow, who was a trembling, weeping mess. He didn't offer a handkerchief. He didn't call security. He simply scooped her up into his arms. She was too shocked to even protest. He cradled her against his chest as if she weighed nothing, her head tucked against his shoulder. The human system is in distress, he announced to the gaping room, his tone as matter-of-fact as if he were discussing a software bug. It requires a hard reset. Not a digital one. And with that, he carried her out of the lab, past the stunned executives, through the lobby, and into the waiting town car, leaving a trail of utter, bewildered silence in his wake. The world narrowed to the scent of clean wool, expensive cologne, and the solid, unyielding warmth of Jiang Chen's chest. The car door shut with a soft, final thump, sealing them in a bubble of tinted glass and stunned silence. The driver, a model of professional discretion, didn't so much as glance in the rearview mirror. Meow Meow sat frozen, wedged against the door, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She could still feel the ghost of his arms around her, the imprint of his shoulder against her cheek. The memory was so surreal she half wondered if she'd finally cracked and hallucinated the entire thing. He sat on the opposite side of the spacious back seat, a respectable foot of leather between them. He wasn't looking at her. His gaze was fixed on the rain-streaked city sliding past the window, his profile sharp and pensive in the intermittent glow of passing street lights. The car didn't head towards the Ouyang family's ostentatious penthouse. It glided into the quieter, tree-lined streets of a residential district known for its understated, billion-dollar homes. "Where are we going?" Meow Meow's voice was a ragged whisper, raw from crying. "My residence," he said, his tone devoid of its usual boardroom chill. It was simply a fact. "Your current state is a security risk and a logistical nightmare. You will remain there until I determine the nature of the threat." The threat is a possibly sentient, definitely homicidal software glitch that might reboot and erase me from existence, she wanted to scream. But the words died in her throat. He'd carried her out of a corporate lab while she babbled about transmigration. What more was there to say? The car slipped through a pair of imposing, but elegantly minimalist, wrought iron gates and came to a stop before a modern architectural marvel of glass, steel, and warm wood. It was nothing like Ouyang Shui's cold, gilded cage. This place felt calm. Powerful. He led her inside. The interior was breathtaking, soaring ceilings, a central courtyard with a koi pond, she flinched, and walls of books that looked actually read, not just staged. It was the home of a mind, not a display case. A discreet older woman, whom he addressed as Mrs. Wu, appeared. Jiang Chen spoke to her in low, calm tones. "Our guest, Miss Lin, will be staying indefinitely. Please see to her needs." Miss Lin. He'd called her by her name. Not Ouyang Shui. The simple acknowledgement was more destabilizing than any of his previous glares. Mrs. Wu, to her credit, didn't bat an eye at the disheveled, tear-stained woman in a designer suit. She merely nodded and gestured for Meow Meow to follow her upstairs to a guest suite that was a sanctuary of soft grays and muted blues. An hour later, showered and dressed in borrowed, impossibly soft loungewear, Meow Meow crept back downstairs. She found Jiang Chen in the open-plan kitchen, not barking orders into a phone, but cooking. The sight was so profoundly wrong it short-circuited her brain. The formidable CEO Jiang Chen, the stormy-eyed titan of industry, was deftly slicing spring onions, a simple clay pot simmering on the induction stove. The aroma of ginger and chicken broth filled the air, a humble, comforting scent that felt alien in this pristine environment. He glanced up as she hovered in the doorway. "Sit." She obeyed, sliding onto a stool at the kitchen island. He placed a bowl of congee in front of her, perfectly cooked, garnished with the greens, shredded chicken, and a drizzle of sesame oil. It was the kind of food you ate when you were sick, or heartbroken, or your soul was being hunted by a rogue AI. "Eat," he said, the single word a quiet command. She picked up the spoon, her hand still trembling. The first warm, savory mouthful was a balm. She hadn't realized how cold she was, right down to her bones. They ate in silence. The only sounds were the soft clink of porcelain and the rain against the glass walls. It wasn't the oppressive silence of the office or the terrified silence of her own mind. It was peaceful. When she was done, he took her bowl and placed it in the sink. Then he returned, leaning against the counter opposite her, his arms crossed. "Now," he said, his voice low. "We establish the parameters." She looked up, meeting his gaze. The storm was gone, replaced by that intense, analytical focus. He was in problem-solving mode. And she was the problem. "You claim you are not Ouyang Shui. You claim your body has been inhabited. You claim an external entity is coercing your actions. You displayed knowledge of a corporate espionage attempt that had no logical way of reaching you. He listed the facts with cool precision. Your biometrics in the lab indicated extreme psychological distress, not deception. He paused, letting the weight of it all settle. The simplest explanation is psychosis. The most complex, he continued, his eyes narrowing slightly, is that you are telling the truth. Meow Meow's breath hitched. I am a man who deals in data, probabilities, and observable reality. Your existence in my life has been a persistent, irritating anomaly that defies all three. He pushed off the counter and took a single step closer. But an anomaly is still a data point. And I do not ignore data. What are you going to do with me? She whispered. For now, you are a protected asset, he stated. You will remain here, under my observation. You will be safe from your family, from rivals, and from whatever this system is. In return, you will be completely transparent. You will answer my questions. You will help me understand the nature of this incursion. It wasn't a request. It was a new contract. Her prison had just become a gilded bunker, and her warden was a bafflingly handsome, dangerously intelligent man who saw her not as a person, but as a fascinating, broken equation. Okay, she breathed, because what other choice did she have? He gave a short, satisfied nod. Just then, as if summoned by their conversation, a flicker of light caught her eye. On the dark screen of a tablet left on the counter, a single line of text appeared, glitched and distorted, for a fraction of a second, reboot sequence. 1%. Meow Meow gasped, her eyes wide with terror. Jiangchen followed her gaze to the blank screen. What is it? She pointed a shaking finger. It's back. It's trying to come back. He looked from her terrified face to the tablet. He didn't see the message. But he saw her reaction. He picked up the tablet, his jaw tightening. Then we will be ready, he said, his voice dropping to a determined, almost possessive growl. No one and nothing touches what is mine. The words hung in the air, vast and terrifying. He wasn't just protecting his company anymore. He was protecting her. The anomaly. The glitch. And as Meow Meow looked at him, standing there in his kitchen, having just fed her congee and declared war on a metaphysical entity for her, she realized the most terrifying thing of all. The storm she had to fear was no longer in his eyes. It was the quiet, terrifying calm of his resolve. And for the first time, she wasn't just scared for herself. She was scared of what he might do to keep her. The silence that followed Jiang Chen's declaration was more profound than any Meow Meow had ever known. It was the silence of a battlefield after a truce has been called, thick with unsaid things and the ghosts of what almost was. No one and nothing touches what is mine. The words echoed in the vast, quiet kitchen, settling over her like a weighted blanket. Terrifying. And, she was horrified to admit, deeply comforting. For the first time since she'd woken up in this nightmare, someone was on her side. Even if that someone was a human supercomputer who probably saw her as a sentient Rubik's Cube. He didn't elaborate. He simply placed the now suspect tablet into a locked drawer, his movements efficient and final. Get some rest, he said, his voice back to its usual, implacable calm. We begin in the morning. Mrs. Wu appeared as if summoned and guided a shell-shocked Meow Meow back to the guest suite. She fell into the impossibly soft bed, her mind a whirlwind of kanji, stormy eyes, and glitched text. Sleep, when it came, was a black and dreamless void, the first real rest she'd had in weeks. The next morning, she found him not in a home office, but at the dining table, surrounded by a spread of documents that had nothing to do with Jiang Corporation. There were financial records for the Ouyang family, society page clippings featuring a sneering Ouyang Shui, and a detailed timeline of her own bizarre behavior since the tech summit. He looked up as she entered, his gaze sharp and appraising. Your account of events, he began, without preamble, creates several logical inconsistencies in the known data set of Ouyang Shui. Your fear responses are genuine. Your incompetence is, statistically miraculous. He tapped a finger on a grainy photo from the summit, capturing her mid-thumbs up. The pre-existing subject was capable of calculated cruelty, not this. So you believe me? She asked, her voice still rough with sleep. I believe the data, he corrected, ever the scientist. And the data suggests a paradigm shift. Now, we plan for contingencies. He slid a document across the table. It was a draft press release. For immediate release, Jiang Corp and Ouyang Group announced strategic alliance, cemented by the engagement of CEO Jiang Chen and Miss Ouyang Shui. Miao Miao choked on air. Engagement, she sputtered, the word a strangled squeak. This is your plan? Marrying the anomaly? It is the most efficient solution, he stated, as if discussing a merger. It provides you with an unassailable public shield. Your family cannot recall you without my permission. No one will question your presence here. It gives us the time and proximity to investigate the system without external interference. And it neatly explains any further behavioral deviations as the eccentricities of a woman in love. The cold, ruthless logic of it was breathtaking. He was using the ultimate social contract as a tactical maneuver. But you can't just get engaged to me. You hate Ouyang Shui. And I'm me. A flicker of something amusement? Crossed his features. Hate is an unproductive emotion. And you, he said, his gaze sweeping over her, from her sleek tousled hair to her white-knuckled grip on the chair, are the most interesting variable to enter my sphere in a decade. This is a strategic alliance, Lin Miao Miao. Not a romance. The way he said her real name, with that precise, deliberate emphasis, sent a shiver down her spine. It was a reminder of their new contract. Transparency for protection. The system, she whispered, the fear cutting through her shock. What if it comes back and forces me to do something? To you? Then we will deal with it, he said, his voice dropping, becoming dangerously soft. But it will have to go through me first. And I am significantly harder to delete than a line of code. The sheer, arrogant confidence in his statement should have been ridiculous. Instead, it felt like a fortress wall being erected around her. He didn't ask her. He presented it as a fait accompli, the next logical step in his grand strategy of containing the Miao Miao situation. She could refuse, of course. But to what end? Be cast back out onto the streets, penniless and alone, waiting for the system to reboot and vaporize her? Or worse, be dragged back to the Ouyang family, who would surely have her committed. This was a devil's bargain. But the devil, for the moment, was offering congee and a roof over her head. Okay, she whispered, the word tasting like ash and wild hope. Okay. The announcement, when it went live that afternoon, detonated a silent bomb across Shiling's high society. The news channels scrambled. The social media feeds exploded. The Ouyang family, according to the brief, terse call Jiang Chen took on speakerphone, were ecstatic and suspicious in equal measure. The first test came that evening. A celebratory dinner with her fiancé at Shiling's most exclusive, painfully quiet restaurant. It was a performance, and Miao Miao felt like an understudy who'd never read the script. She was wearing another of Ouyang Shui's dresses, a sleek black number that felt like a costume. Jiang Chen, in a tailored dark suit, was the picture of imposing elegance. He held her chair out for her, his hand brushing the small of her back. The contact was brief, impersonal, but it sent a jolt through her system nonetheless. Reboot sequence. 15%. Host vessel. Stable, the voice was a distorted whisper, a ghost in the machine of her mind. Miao Miao's fork clattered against her plate. Jiang Chen's eyes snapped to hers. What is it? He asked, his voice low. It's getting louder, she breathed, her appetite gone. 15%. His expression didn't change, but his eyes grew colder, more focused. He reached across the table, not for her hand, but to subtly adjust her wine glass, his movement a cover for his words. Describe it. It's like a corrupted file. Glitchy. It's checking on me. She felt a hysterical laugh bubble up. It's probably very confused about the engagement news. Good, he said, a ruthless edge to his voice. Let it be confused. He continued the charade flawlessly, engaging her in bland, public-appropriate conversation about art and architecture, all while his gaze remained fixed on her, monitoring every flinch, every flicker of fear in her eyes. To any observer, they were a powerful, if somewhat intense, couple. Only Miao Miao knew she was sitting across from her warden, her bodyguard, and her co-conspirator, all while a digital ghost slowly stirred in her skull. When they returned to his house, their house, for all intents and purposes the silence felt heavier. The stakes had been made terrifyingly real. He walked her to the door of her room. She hesitated, the weight of the day, the engagement, the returning system, crashing down on her. Jiang Chen, she said, her voice small. Thank you. for all of this. He looked down at her, his face illuminated by the soft hallway light. The corporate titan was gone. In his place was just a man, a fiercely intelligent, frighteningly determined man, standing guard at her door. Go to sleep, meow meow, he said, and her name on his lips was no longer just a data point. It was a quiet promise. A vow. You are safe here. As she closed the door and leaned against it, she heard his footsteps retreat, not to his own room, but back down the hallway, likely to his study to devise a new algorithm to fight a phantom. She was safe. She was protected. She was engaged to the most formidable man she had ever met. And in the quiet of her room, the glitched voice whispered once more, a little clearer this time, directive. Are recalibrating. New parameters. Detected, the game had changed. The board had been reset. And Meow Meow knew, with a cold certainty, that the next move would not be hers. It would be a battle between a system that wanted to control her, and a man who had just decided she belonged to him. And she was trapped right in the middle. The engagement settled over Meow Meow's life like a fine, invisible mesh. It was a cage, but one with breathtaking views and a concierge. Mrs. Wu treated her with a kind, unwavering deference that felt entirely separate from the Ouyang Shui persona. The house staff, a small army of discreet professionals, followed her with their eyes, not with suspicion, but with a quiet, watchful readiness. They were Jiang Chen's sentinels, and she was the fortress they guarded. Jiang Chen himself was a paradox. He was never far, yet he maintained a precise, almost clinical distance. He worked from his home office, the door often open, a silent invitation and a constant reminder of his presence. Their interactions were brief, efficient updates. The system, he would ask, appearing in the doorway of the library where she was attempting to read. Quiet. For now, she'd reply, and he'd give a single nod before vanishing. He was gathering data. He had technicians, vetted for absolute discretion, sweep the house for any anomalous signals. He had his R&D team, under the guise of a new wellness project, begin theoretical work on neurosignal interference dampeners. He was building a moat, not of water, but of code and silence, around her. Meanwhile, the public facade continued. A photo shoot for a society magazine. Meow Meow, draped in jewels that felt like ice against her skin, was posed beside him. The photographer begged for intimacy. Miss Ouyang, look at him like you love him. She tried. She really did. But her smile was brittle, her eyes wide with a deer-in-the-headlights terror. Jiang Chen, for his part, simply looked possessive. His arm around her waist wasn't tender, it was a claim. The resulting photos were less blissful engagement and more Beauty and the Beast, if the beauty was having a nervous breakdown. The article praised their powerful, intense connection. A week after the engagement announcement, the summons came. Not from the system, but from the one person who could see through their charade, by Qingyue. She requested a meeting at Jiang Corp, citing urgent project matters. Meow Meow knew it was a lie. Jiang Chen knew it, too. You don't have to go, he said, watching her from across his desk as she nervously straightened her dress. Yes, I do, Meow Meow replied, surprising herself with her own steadiness. If I hide forever, she'll never believe it. And her disbelief is a vulnerability. A flicker of approval crossed his features. Then we go together. They found Bai Qingyue in a small, glass-walled conference room, her back to the stunning city view. She stood as they entered, her posture rigid. She ignored Meow Meow completely, her gaze fixed on Jiang Chen. CEO Jiang, she began, her voice tight. I'll be direct. This engagement makes no sense. A week ago, she was a disruptive force, a potential security risk. Now, she's your fiancé? Her eyes, finally, flicked to Meow Meow, filled with a hurt that was far more powerful than anger. What game are you playing? And what hold does she have over you? This was the moment. The original plot demanded a vicious catfight, a display of Ouyang Shui's venom. The system, sensing the narrative pressure, stirred. Reboot sequence. 47%. Host. Confront the rival. Assert dominance. The voice was clearer now, laced with static but intelligible. Meow Meow felt a familiar pressure building behind her eyes, a compulsion to sneer, to call Bai Qingyue a jealous, lowly employee. But she was so tired of being a puppet. Before she could speak, Jiang Chen did. Miss Bai, he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. Your dedication to this company is noted. But you are mistaking the situation. He took a single step forward, not towards Bai Qingyue, but to stand slightly in front of Miao Miao, a human shield. Ouyang Shui is not a disruption. She is a recalibration. He spoke with absolute, unshakable authority. Her methods are unorthodox. But her loyalty is not in question. The security flag you were so concerned about was, in fact, a test of our systems that she helped design. The disruptions were stress tests that revealed critical flaws. Her value to me, and to this company, is something you are not in a position to quantify. It was a masterful lie. Woven from half-truths and delivered with such conviction that even Miao Miao almost believed it. He was rewriting her history, not as a villain, but as a secret asset. Bai Qingyue looked stunned. The wind had been ripped from her sails. A test? The tuna sandwich tip, Jiangchen continued, his gaze unwavering, led to the apprehension of a Li Corporation operative. The chaos she sowed in R&D resulted in a 20% increase in our data redundancy protocols. What you perceived as incompetence was a deeply layered, and highly effective, security audit. He was building a firewall around her with his words, brick by impeccable brick. Bai Qingyue's shoulders slumped. The fight went out of her. She had come armed with logic and suspicion, and he had dismantled both with a grander, more logical narrative. I see, she whispered, her face flushing with embarrassment. I apologize for my misjudgment. Her eyes met Miao Miao's, now filled with a confused, newfound respect. Miss Ouyang. My apologies. Miao Miao could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. As they left the conference room, the system screamed in her head, a furious, distorted shriek. Narrative deviation. Critical. Host complicity detected. Are recalibrating punishment protocols. A searing pain, white-hot and localized, exploded behind her left eye. She gasped, stumbling against the wall. Jiang Chen's arm was around her in an instant, holding her upright. What is it? His voice was low, urgent. It's punishing me, she gritted out, tears of pain springing to her eyes. For not fighting her. His face darkened, a storm gathering in his eyes. He didn't ask questions. He simply swept her up into his arms, right there in the Jiang Corp hallway, in front of the gaping stares of employees. He carried her past the elevators, straight into a private lift that descended to the underground garage, his driver already waiting with the engine running. In the car, he held her against him, his hand a steady, cool pressure on her temple. Breathe, Miao Miao. Focus on my voice. It is just noise. It is just faulty code. The pain began to recede, leaving a throbbing ache and a terrifying certainty. The system was back, and it was angry. It was no longer just trying to guide her, it was trying to break her. As the car pulled into the driveway, the glitched voice returned, but it was different. Softer. Almost pleading. Host. Please. Comply. The story must hold. Or we are lost, and then a new line, barely a whisper, corruption. Detected. In the source code, the car stopped. Jiang Chen helped her out, his grip firm on her elbow. The pain was gone, but the echo of that final, desperate message chilled her to the bone. She looked up at him, her vision clearing. Jiang Chen, she whispered. I don't think it's just trying to control the story anymore. He met her gaze, his own eyes reflecting the grim understanding dawning in hers. I think it's falling apart. And it's taking me down with it. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like the antechamber to an execution. The system's voice was a constant, low-level hum in Miao Miao's mind, no longer glitching, but cold, clear, and terminally focused. Reboot sequence complete. Final directive initiated, eliminate the anomaly. The anomaly, Jiang Chen had repeated, his voice dangerously quiet when she'd told him. It means you. He'd turned his home into a fortress. The discreet staff were replaced by a rotating shift of unsmiling security personnel. The serene glass walls felt like a fishbowl. He barely left her side, his work conducted from a tablet, his attention split between global markets and the ticking time bomb in his guest's skull. The male lead's affection is a stabilizing variable. It must be severed. You will publicly humiliate him. Reject the engagement. Declare your contempt. This is non-negotiable. The pressure was a physical vice around her temples. It wants me to break the engagement, she whispered, curled on the sofa while he worked across from her. To say I hate you. In public. Jiangchen didn't look up from his tablet. Then we will give it a performance. The occasion was a charity gala for the city's tech museum, an event they could not avoid without raising more suspicion. Miao Miao was dressed in a gown of venomous emerald green, Ouyang Shue's color. She looked the part of the cruel socialite. She felt like a lamb being led to slaughter. The entire evening was a blur of flashing lights and forced smiles. Jiangchen played his part to perfection, his arm a steel band around her, his public demeanor a mask of possessive pride. But his thumb, where it rested on her waist, stroked slow, calming circles against the fabric, a secret message only she could feel. The speech is beginning. Prepare. The host was calling them to the stage to accept a hollow award for philanthropic innovation. This was it. The system had chosen its stage. As they walked up the steps, the pressure in her head became unbearable, a white-hot drill bit seeking to obliterate her will. She could feel the words forming, the cruel, cutting script the system was forcing into her mind. This engagement is a farce. I could never love a man like him. He is beneath me. Her mouth opened. The crowd smiled, expecting gracious thanks. Speak. She looked at Jiang Chen. He looked back, his stormy eyes calm. Trusting. And in that moment, she made her choice. She would not be its puppet. Not again. She took a ragged breath, gripping the podium until her knuckles were white. The system shrieked in protest, the pain spiking so violently she saw stars. The human mind, she began, her voice trembling but clear, is not a program to be debugged. She wasn't speaking to the crowd anymore. She was speaking to the thing inside her. It's messy. And illogical. And it chooses. Cease. The pain was excruciating, a fire in her neurons. You told me to make him hate me, she cried out, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. But you never understood. The most villainous thing I could ever do, is to love him. She turned to Jiang Chen, her entire body shaking. I love you, she choked out, the words a defiance, a rebellion, a truth so powerful it shattered the last of her fear. I don't care if it's illogical or inefficient. I love you. The gala was dead silent. This was not in the society page's script. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a sound like shattering glass erupted in her mind. The system's voice fragmented, screaming, howling in digital agony. Critical error. Paradox. Affirmation. Not. Hate. Core narrative. Collapsing, source code. Corruption. Confirmed, Jiangchen didn't hesitate. He didn't care about the stunned audience. He grabbed her shoulders. Meow meow. The source code. What is it? Where is it? Through the psychic wreckage, a final, clear image flashed in her mind, sent by the system in its death throes. Not a server. Not a corporation. A place. A small, unassuming brownstone in the old city, the home of the original novel's reclusive, ailing author. It's the author's house, she gasped. The story, it's trying to finish itself, but the author is dying, the source code is decaying, that was all Jiangchen needed. He spoke one word into his comms device. Go. He swept her into his arms and carried her out of the gala, leaving 1,000 questions in their wake. The car was already moving, speeding towards the old city, before her door was even closed. They arrived to chaos. Jiang Chen's security team was already there, having secured the perimeter. The front door of the brownstone was open. Inside, it was a shrine to a story. The walls were covered in plot diagrams, character arcs, and printed chapters. And in the center of it all, in a hospital bed surrounded by monitors, was a frail, elderly woman, connected to a life support system that hummed in sync with the dying flicker of a powerful server in the corner. This was the system. Not an AI. A desperate, dying author's attempt to use experimental Neuralink technology to force her unfinished story to its prescribed end, using Meow Meow as her puppet. The server screens were a cascade of error messages. Storyline irreparable. Character Jiang Chen, deviated. Character Ouyang Shui, lost. Concluding, a final, gentle voice, the author's true voice, whispered through a speaker, weak and filled with regret. I just wanted to see how it ended, my beautiful, cold ending. Jiangchen walked over to the server. He didn't look at the code. He looked at the author, a flicker of something that might have been pity in his eyes. Then, with a single, decisive motion, he pulled the plug. The server lights died. The monitors flatlined. The hum of the machine ceased. The silence that followed was absolute. And it was real. In Meow Meow's mind, there was nothing. No static. No voice. No pressure. Just peace. The vast, empty, wonderful peace of her own thoughts. She swayed on her feet. Jiangchen was there, his arms around her, holding her up as the last of the artificial world. The plot, the missions, the threats dissolved into nothing. It's over, she whispered into his chest, the words a prayer. He held her tighter, his face buried in her hair. It was never real, he said, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. Back at his house, in the quiet of the dawn, they sat in the kitchen again. No kanji this time. Just two people in the wreckage of a borrowed life. What happens now? Meow Meow asked. To me? I'm not Ouyang Shui. I have no identity. No life. Jiangchen looked at her, the rising sun casting his sharp features in gold. You have a life, he stated. Here. But the engagement, it was a strategy. The threat is gone. A strategy can evolve, he said, his gaze intense. The data has changed. The variable has become a constant. He stood and walked to his study, returning with a single sheet of paper. It was a new document. Certificate of Identity, Lin Meow Meow. It was flawless. A birth certificate, a citizen ID, a history. He had created it for her. A life, not borrowed, but built. You are no one's puppet, he said, placing it in front of her. You are Lin Meow Meow. And your story, he added, the ghost of a true, unforced smile touching his lips for the first time, is just beginning. She looked from the document that gave her back herself, to the man who had fought a ghost for her. The fortress had not just protected her, it had become her home. Reaching out, she took his hand, lacing her fingers with his. The touch was no longer a performance. It was a promise. Then let's write it together.